It was a hot, sweltering afternoon in late July when Ethan Barnes first stepped into the austere corridors of the state courthouse as an ambitious law student. Amid rows of stern-faced lawyers and chattering clerks, Ethan carried with him a quiet, nervous determination, his heart pounding in rhythm with the echoing footsteps on polished marble floors. New to this environment, he held a passion for justice mingled with trepidation, fully aware that his journey to renown in the legal world would be strewn with challenges. Inside one of the many courtrooms, fate, however, had a peculiar lesson waiting for him, one that would come to define his life. That fateful day, Ethan was assigned to observe a high-profile trial for a case that had baffled many of his esteemed mentors. Sitting in the cramped gallery, he absorbed every nuance in the atmosphere, every detail of the proceedings. The eloquent barristers sparred back and forth, their rhetoric gliding effortlessly over the creaking wooden benches. But as the trial unfolded, a moment arrived during which Ethan's naivety was cruelly exposed. A gavel's sharp rap signaled a recess, and in a leaning smile, one outspoken senior attorney, known widely for his acerbic wit, directed a sardonic remark toward the bright-eyed novice. "Look at that eager little student, as if he could ever fill these vociferous shoes," he jeered, his voice carrying a mocking cadence that rippled through the courtroom. Every ear present seemed to catch the barbed tone, and with whispered laughter, Ethan felt his courage wane. The sting of embarrassment would haunt him, a reminder of his perceived insignificance in a room filled with legal titans. Ethan's world of dreams and aspirations collided violently with the harsh reality of ridicule that day. Once an emblem of hope, his dream of becoming a renowned advocate was momentarily eclipsed by self-doubt. For days after, he lay awake at night, replaying that moment over and over like a broken record. The memory of the sneer and his own trembling voice when he attempted to speak up left indelible scars on his fragile self-belief. His professors, noticing his subdued demeanor, offered gentle yet firm words of encouragement. "Every great mind has faced the sting of rejection," they insisted. Yet those words did little to stifle the embers of humiliation that smoldered within him. Refusing to be defined by a single episode, Ethan burrowed himself into his studies. He spent endless nights among stacks of legal journals and case files, slowly transforming his once wavering passion into a robust commitment. His early setbacks, instead of crippling his resolve, became the driving forces behind his ascent. Every lecture, every moot court practice, and every lengthy debate stitched together the fabric of his growth. Even the memory of that courtroom jeer, rather than diminishing him, fueled countless hours of tireless work, a silent promise to himself that one day, fortune would yield a twist of fate. 5 years later, fate had circled back in a way that no one, least of all Ethan, could have ever imagined. The day had dawned crisp and clear, bearing the hallmark of a turning point in history. Now a seasoned lawyer with a reputation earned through perseverance and compassion, Ethan found himself summoned not to the defendant's stand or as a representative for a friend, but to the bench itself. Today, Ethan was presiding as the judge in a trial that had captured statewide attention, a landmark case with high stakes for both the community and the legacy of justice in the region. Seated behind an imposing oak desk in his resplendent courtroom, his gavel gleamed under the chandelier's glow. In that moment, the very air around him resonated with the newfound gravity of his role. Those who had once glanced at the timid law student belonged now to the anxious public watching his every move. As the courtroom filled with a mixture of dignitaries, attorneys, and ordinary citizens, a quiet murmur of disbelief rippled throughout. Whispers flitted like small motes in the sun. Is it really him? The boy who was mocked so cruelly. Is he now our judge? Witnessing the crowd's response stirred memories of his bitter past. But rather than feeding the embers of regret, it fanned the flames of his renewed determination. With each measured breathing second, he recalled all the nights spent poring over statutes, the early mornings in dim libraries, and every small victory that built the cornerstone of his character. His hands, while slender and delicate, gripped the bench not in fear this time, but as a gesture of command, a symbol of a man who had once been scorned and was now revered. The trial that lay before him was as complex as it was emotionally charged. The case involved a well-known entrepreneur accused of a series of fraudulent schemes that had financially devastated a community many grew up in. The stakes for the defendant were high. The community's trust lay in the balance, and a misstep along any avenue risked undoing years of painstaking progress. Ethan listened intently as both sides presented their arguments. The prosecution, led by a fervent and articulate lawyer, painted a vivid picture of willful manipulation, repeating in meticulous detail the strategic machinations of the defendant. In contrast, the defense maintained a calm, controlled narrative, suggesting that the evidence was arisen from an unfortunate series of misunderstandings. As Ethan prepared to deliver his judgments, he knew that this was not merely a trial of facts. It was a crucible that would test the very mettle of his character and his commitment to fairness. In reaching his decision, Judge Barnes sifted through pages of evidence, testimonies filled with emotion, and the unresolved questions that lingered in everyone paused silence. With wisdom imbued by years of relentless effort, he recognized that the truth was nestled somewhere between the extremes. In a riveting moment of clarity, he delivered his verdict, a decision that balanced both retribution and redemption. His words, both firm and compassionate, resonated with a profound sense of justice. "Let there be a reckoning," he proclaimed, "but also a chance for renewal." The courtroom swelled with emotion. Some applauded his nuanced approach. Others in the gallery maintained a respectful silence as they absorbed the weight of his judgment. As the gavel came down that afternoon, there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere, not unlike the transformative shift that had taken place in Ethan's life half a decade ago. For the spectators, it was more than a successful ruling. It was an embodiment of the timeless idea that every setback can harbor the seeds of redemption and growth. In that moment, Ethan's journey from mockery to majesty was complete, each step along the way cementing the belief that one's origins do not dictate one's destiny. Yet, fate's design is rarely linear. In the days following the proceedings, despite the success of his decision, subtle ripples of discord began surfacing. Rumors circulated that the esteemed lawyer-turned-judge possessed personal biases that had, perhaps, influenced his rulings. Whispers in the corridors of power suggested that much lay behind his fair and balanced demeanor. A once-nurtured secret from his early career came to the forefront, a haunting memory of the courtroom ridicule that had both scarred and steered him. Critics, knowing his past, questioned whether the ambition born from humiliation had clouded his judgment in particular cases. Meanwhile, supporters saw a man who had transcended adversity to become a pillar of integrity. Among those critics was a prominent legal scholar who had become involved in the case. His voice, often raised in public forums, argued that the transformation from a mocked student to a powerful figure on the bench was too poetic to be taken at face value. "There is a danger in allowing the wounds of past mockery to drive one's decisions," he declared in an op-ed that rippled across legal journals and news outlets alike. His words, filled with cautionary notes of ambition unchecked by humility, stirred debates within legal circles that often spilled into public discourse. In those heated exchanges, Ethan stood as both a symbol of achievement and a cautionary tale, a man who had paid the steep price for the pursuit of validation and then tried to give back to a community that had once laughed. Through these challenges, Ethan found his true test, not in the courtroom but within his innermost reflections. Late at night, long after the lights of the courthouse dimmed and the echoes of the day's decisions faded away, he sat alone in his chambers. In the silence, he revisited every painful memory, the mocking voice of that senior attorney, the self-doubt that gnawed at him, and the isolation that had accompanied his climb to authority. These moments of introspection forced him to ask, had he, in his pursuit of redemption, become something of a tyrant, a man too willing to let personal pain mar his pursuit of truth and justice? This rumination led him to seek advice from those he trusted, mentors who had once encouraged him, colleagues who had seen his transformation, and even friends who had known him in his most vulnerable moments. One evening, after a particularly arduous public debate, Ethan reached out to one such mentor, a retired judge whose reputation was as formidable as it was revered. In the modest study of an old estate far removed from the glare of modern courtrooms, the two men sat with cups of bitter coffee. The mentor listened intently as Ethan recounted both his achievements and the niggling doubt that had begun to fester beneath his polished exterior. "Ethan," his mentor intoned gently, "the very wound that once made you tremble can also be the source of your deepest insight. But always remember the difference between the drive to compensate for past humiliations and the unbiased pursuit of justice." Those words resonated with Ethan. In that moment, he resolved to harness his personal history not as a crutch but as an invaluable guide, one that would always remind him that empathy and fairness must prevail above the pain of personal history. Reinstated to the broader sphere of public life, Judge Barnes began instituting measures in his courtroom that would remind everyone of the sanctity of second chances. He encouraged young law students to share their experiences openly, turning the once hidden shame of humiliation into an honest opportunity for growth and sensitivity. His door, once a symbol of unreachable authority, slowly became a conduit for sharing wisdom with those just commencing their legal journeys. In a series of public addresses, he recounted his own tumultuous rise, emphasizing that missteps were not the end, but an invitation to greater self-awareness. These speeches were peppered with simple yet profound remarks such as, "The echoes of mockery from a long-forgotten day do not define you. They are the stepping stones paving your way to a more just tomorrow." These messages found their way into college lectures and legal symposia, creating a legacy that transcended court decisions. Even as he continued to preside over complex cases with signature precision, there were moments when the past intruded upon the present in disquieting ways. During one particularly contentious trial involving an intricate network of corporate subterfuge, an opposing counsel, a fiery prosecutor with a reputation of challenging even the most seasoned judges, acutely referenced Ethan's earlier days. In a charged outburst during a heated cross-examination, she recalled the moment from years ago when a mocking voice had diminished his prospects. "This court, let it be known, is presided over by the same insecure soul who once shuddered at mere applause," she declared, her voice echoing sharply off the stone walls. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. For a suspended moment, Ethan's eyes reflected a deep melancholy and vulnerability that no one had ever seen before. But then, with a deep breath and a quiet resolve, he retorted, "My past did not make me weak. It taught me how to be unyielding for those who need an unyielding heart." His calm, measured tone dissipated the charged atmosphere, and though the prosecutor pressed on with her arguments, the courtroom bore witness to a judge who was no longer defined by old wounds. Instead, he had transformed them into a guiding light for the cause of justice. News of Ethan's ruling and the trials he had navigated with both firmness and compassion spread like wildfire. His aides in the legal community often remarked on the poetic justice of his journey, a once demeaned law student who had returned as the arbiter of fairness. Interviews in news outlets, debates in academic panels, and long-form articles in major journals painted a portrait of a judge who was as human as he was revered, a man who allowed his past to remind him that empathy must lie at the heart of every ruling. But for Ethan, the transformation was personal, a journey that reached far beyond the mere mechanics of law. It was a redemption that silenced the echoes of gallows laughter with each well-considered decision, a triumph where every gavel swing was a testament to the evolution of a once fragile soul. Despite the admiration, he never turned a blind eye to the personal battles that still raged inside. Every now and then, late at night, a memory would invade his solitude, the sneer of that senior attorney, the hushed laughter in the corridors, and the burning humiliation that once threatened to shatter his spirit. In those solitary moments, he would find solace in the letters and handwritten notes that he'd received from law students who faced their own struggles. In these missives, he discovered stories of perseverance and determination, each reiterating that a single moment of disgrace could blossom into decades of wisdom and service if nurtured with a steady heart. Through these shared experiences, he realized that each scar was not merely a mark of past humiliation, but also a symbol of human resilience. As his reputation grew, so too did the responsibilities of his position. Ethan found himself entangled in cases that touched on the very core of society's conscience, cases that demanded not only legal expertise, but also a delicate moral balance. In one such case, he was tasked with presiding over a trial involving environmental violations by a conglomerate whose misdeeds had devastated a small town's way of life. The local community, still reeling from the economic and ecological collapse that followed the conglomerate's reckless actions, looked to him as a beacon of hope. The hours in that courtroom were long as testimonies poured forth from tearful victims and expert witnesses. The weight of the case pressed upon him like a tangible burden. Yet, amid the despair and frustration, he recognized an opportunity to restore faith in the justice system. Balancing empathy with legal exactitude, he meticulously examined every piece of evidence and every anguished plea. In delivering his verdict, he not only held the perpetrators accountable, but also offered the community a fresh start. With compassion, he announced a series of remedial measures and reparations that would help rebuild shattered lives. It was a decision that was met with both accolades and criticisms. While some lauded him as a guardian of the common people, others decried the perceived leniency. But for Ethan, it was a reminder that justice was as much about restoration as it was about punishment, a delicate dance where each step must be guided by both law and mercy. Following this ruling, the public's fascination with Judge Barnes deepened. Gradually, he began to champion causes outside the courthouse. He initiated outreach programs in underprivileged areas, inviting students to witness court proceedings and learn firsthand the intricacies of law. These interactions, filled with hope and candid discussions about justice and society, helped bridge the chasm between the hallowed halls of the judiciary and the everyday struggles of the common citizen. Under his patronage, legal aid clinics sprouted in neighborhoods where access to justice had been a long-forgotten dream. Despite the relentless demands of his official role, he always found a moment to be present at these clinics, often engaging in thought-provoking discussions that resonated deeply with both the young and the old. For many, he became more than an authority figure. He became a friend and mentor, a living reminder that even the darkest chapters of one's past could ultimately forge a path to redemption and success. In the midst of these public victories, a personal challenge emerged that tested the very core of his identity. A case that hit uncomfortably close to home involved allegations of corruption within a police department, a matter that threatened to erode public trust in institutions that were meant to protect the vulnerable. Some insiders dared whisper that even in his carefully managed facade, Judge Barnes harbored a hidden bias stemming from his early experiences of derision. With the trial unfolding in the same courtroom he had long ruled with compassion, he was beset by inner turmoil. Night after night, as he reviewed case files and reread the testimonies of those involved, he felt the pull of a familiar fear, that if he did not maintain complete objectivity, his own painful memories might corrupt his judgment. It was during one long, sleepless night that he made the most resolute decision of his career. With a trembling hand, he penned a letter of self-reflection, detailing all the ways in which his experiences had informed his every decision, and then shared it with a trusted circle of colleagues and legal advisors. In that vulnerable confession, he laid bare the raw edges of his soul, admitting that while his past was a source of fortitude, it could also serve as a dangerous lens through which to view the present. The transparency of his internal struggle, made public in a confidential memorandum later leaked to the press, sparked a debate that was as fervent as it was introspective. Many admired his honesty, while others questioned the wisdom of exposing such personal vulnerabilities. Yet, in that moment of naked honesty, Ethan reminded everyone that to be truly just, one must also be unflinchingly human. The public discourse that followed was both a challenge and a catalyst, forcing a reflection on the nature of justice, empathy, and the transformative power of personal history. In classrooms, debate halls, and op-ed columns, discussions swirled around the concept of whether a judge's personal history should ever have relevance to their decisions. While the debate was far from settled, one unifying truth emerged. Judge Barnes was a living testament to the fact that personal growth was neither linear nor free of scars. His journey was emblematic of countless others who had taken the painful lessons of mockery and forged them into resolute determination. It was a subtle reminder that beneath every person of stature lay a story of struggle and resilience, the echoes of past failures interwoven with the triumphs of forgiveness and understanding. Yet, even as the weight of his storied past bore down on him, the judicial bench provided a sense of balance, a stage on which the drama of humanity could be played out with relentless precision and unwavering dignity. In one final case of the year, amidst the backdrop of a winter that was as biting as the truths that lay beneath its surface, Judge Barnes was forced to take a stand on an appeal that redefined the very boundaries of jurisprudence. The case, brought forth by a group of disenfranchised citizens whose voices had long been ignored, challenged not only the application of an archaic statute, but also questioned the role of empathy in the administration of law. Standing at the apex of this legal battleground, he listened intently as passionate advocates argued that justice must always be tempered with mercy. The evidence was raw, the stories heart-wrenching. With every word, Ethan felt the deep resonance of his own journey, the pain of humiliation, the solace found in perseverance, and the liberation that only a profound commitment to truth could provide. It was a moment laden with history, a moment where he, too, was not immune to the power of personal narrative and societal transformation. In the end, his ruling on the appeal was emblematic of his career, balanced, compassionate, and imbued with an unwavering belief in second chances. "This court," he declared with quiet authority, "is not a sanctuary for the mighty alone, but a refuge for those who have stumbled and yet seek to rise." His words, delivered in a measured cadence that seemed to echo the beats of every regretful past and every hopeful future, encapsulated the ethos of a man who had weathered humiliation and emerged as a beacon for others. The decision was met with an outpouring of support from the public and a renewed commitment from his colleagues to champion justice that was both fair and deeply humane. In the decades that followed, tales of the judge who had once been a humiliated law student transformed into a legend in legal circles. New generations of aspiring lawyers grew up hearing the story of Ethan Barnes, a man who had turned ridicule into wisdom and adversity into the foundation upon which his judgments were built. His career became a study in the annals of legal philosophy, a reminder that even when momentarily marred by disparagement, the human spirit could rise to commendable heights. In quiet seminars and heated law school debates alike, his journey was recounted as a vivid lesson that every setback endured was but a prelude to a future more luminous than one could ever imagine. Late in his life, as he prepared to retire from the bench, Ethan Barnes took one last opportunity to address a room filled with fresh-faced law students at a grand university hall. The auditorium was hushed with anticipation, each student eager to glean wisdom from the man who had earned the reverence of judges and the admiration of people far beyond the corridors of power. With gentle humility, he recounted the early days of his career, when a single mocking remark had nearly derailed his ambitions. "Remember," he advised, "that every sneer, every moment of humiliation, if taken to heart, can either shatter you or shape you. I chose to shape my destiny with the fractures of my past, and let them guide me toward justice that honors every person's struggle." His voice, seasoned with experience and soft with remembered vulnerability, resonated deeply with every listener. The applause that followed was not just for his achievements, but for the transformative lesson that each of his experiences, both bitter and sweet, had imbued him with. Even after his retirement, Ethan's story continued to ripple across the legal landscape. His legacy was carried forward in new reforms that emphasized the importance of empathy in judicial proceedings, and in mentoring programs designed specifically for those who had once felt lost or overlooked. A small bench in the courthouse's lobby bore his name, a quiet symbol of excellence and resilience that greeted every visitor with a reminder that greatness is often born from the unlikeliest of origins. Whenever aspiring attorneys walked past that bench, they were encouraged to remember that the path of justice is rarely linear, yet it is precisely the winding road, replete with stumbles, that ultimately leads to true greatness. During one reflective winter afternoon, years after his retirement, Ethan sat in a modest study surrounded by mementos and old law books. He gazed at the portraits of the mentors who had once nurtured a timid student into an authoritative guardian of justice. With a soft smile and a tear momentarily glistening in his eyes, he whispered to himself, "Every wound tells a story, and every scar is a chapter in the journey toward redemption." In that quiet contemplation, he understood that the life of a judge, much like the life of any human being, was not solely defined by accolades or scathing criticisms, but by the continuous act of rising after every fall. It was the story of transformation, a saga where ridicule had metamorphosed into resilience and humiliation into a wellspring of compassion. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon one final time on a long and illustrious career, Ethan Barnes' legacy endured. The echo of his gavel, once a symbol of the weight of his own painful past, had evolved into a clarion call for a justice that was as inclusive as it was decisive. His journey, from the days of whispered derision to the triumphant moments on the bench, was a living testament to the indomitable human spirit. It reminded all who walked the corridors of justice that every humiliation, every moment of despair, could be transmuted into the virtues of wisdom, fairness, and an unwavering commitment to serve. In that transformation lay the very essence of true justice, one that recognized the power of second chances, the value of a heartfelt apology, and the promise that from the deepest pain could emerge the brightest light. Thus, the courtroom in which Judge Barnes once presided remained not only a place of legal decisions, but also a sanctuary of hope. A constant reminder that even as life's cruelty threatened to break the human spirit, the resolve to rise, to learn, and ultimately to lead, could create a legacy that outshone every moment of past disgrace. The story of Ethan Barnes was etched into the annals of legal history, a reminder that redemption was never beyond reach, and that sometimes the greatest triumphs arise from the humblest beginnings. In the echo of every gavel strike and the quiet murmur of courtroom whispers, the legend of a law student who had once been mocked continued to inspire and educate. His was a life that, against all odds, found meaning in adversity and served as an enduring beacon of hope for every heart that had ever been broken by ridicule. And as new generations filled the seats of courtroom galleries and university lecture halls, they carried forth the lesson that sometimes the most resilient souls are born not in spite of humiliation, but because of its transformative power. A lesson forever emblazoned in the legacy of Judge Ethan Barnes.